The first sign that something was wrong came early in the morning, when the sky, usually a soft pastel of orange and pink, was overtaken by an unnatural shade of purple. The sun barely made an appearance before thick, swirling clouds began to take shape. Strange clouds, deep and dark, swirling in ways that didn't make sense. At first, people thought it was some kind of freak storm, the kind of freak event that had happened before. Weather patterns shifted and changed. A storm was the only logical explanation. But it wasn't a storm. It was something else, something far more sinister. In New York City, the first tremors of an invasion were felt as the ground beneath people's feet seemed to shudder. A low hum in the distance, faint but undeniably present, grew louder with every passing second. People looked up from their morning routines, confused, unsettled. The hum became a roar, and that's when the first ships appeared. Massive vessels, nothing like anything the world had ever seen. They appeared from nowhere, breaking through the clouds as though they had been waiting there for years. One ship, an enormous black hulk of a vessel, hovered over the city, casting its massive shadow over Times Square. Its surface was sleek, like dark glass, shimmering with an energy that made the air itself feel electric. Others followed, hundreds of them, each one larger than the last. They descended with a frightening elegance, their craft cutting through the sky with terrifying speed. And then, without warning, they struck. The energy pulses began, a light that burned so bright it was almost impossible to look at it. And then, the destruction. Buildings that had stood for over a century crumbled in an instant. The once bustling streets turned into a war zone, the air filled with the roar of explosions, the sound of people screaming, and the haunting whistle of falling debris. The military responded almost immediately, but there was no time to prepare. Tanks and fighter jets were torn apart by weapons they didn't even understand. Everything the world had built, all of it, felt as fragile as a sandcastle before an incoming wave. In that moment, humanity was forced to confront a brutal truth. Earth was no longer the dominant power in the universe, and whatever these beings were, they weren't interested in making friends. But what the invaders didn't realize was that humanity had survived against impossible odds before. No one had ever seen Earth as anything more than a backwater planet, a place for second-rate life forms, a world so far removed from the galactic stage that no one even bothered to visit. But Earth had something that no other planet possessed: resilience, tenacity, and the unyielding will to survive. The humans didn't wait for orders. They didn't have time for plans. In the face of overwhelming power, they instinctively fought back with everything they had. In every major city, scattered groups of civilians gathered together, determined not to lie down and die. Even as cities crumbled and chaos reigned, they found ways to resist, armed with whatever they could find: old weapons, tools, or even just the sheer will to defend their homes. They became something the invaders had never expected, a threat across the country. Military units scrambled to coordinate. They sent jets into the air, launched counterattacks with whatever weapons they had on hand. But the alien ships, impervious to conventional weaponry, cut through everything in their path. One by one, fighter jets were torn apart, helicopters were brought down, and tanks were obliterated by weaponry far beyond anything humanity had seen. Yet, they fought on. In a small remote town in Ohio, a group of civilians huddled in an old barn, watching the sky burn with explosions. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground vibrated with the force of distant blasts. But even there, in the middle of nowhere, the fight for survival began. Mike Carter, a local mechanic, was the first to spot something useful: collection of old firearms left over from a hunting trip years ago. His heart raced as he thought of his family, his friends, all of them scattered across the town. If they could organize, if they could somehow find a way to stand together, maybe they could survive. But that was just a dream, at least, until the first alien patrol passed over the town. The invaders had underestimated humanity in one crucial way. While they may have been technologically advanced beyond anything Earth had ever known, they had failed to take into account the one thing that had driven humanity forward for millennia: the will to fight. Whether it was through sheer necessity or innate instinct, humans refused to surrender. They didn't understand the concept of defeat, not when their loved ones were on the line, not when their homes were being torn apart. Back in New York, a small group of military operatives found an unexpected opportunity to strike back. After a series of attacks, they had finally managed to retrieve a piece of alien technology. It wasn't much, just a damaged energy core from one of the ships, but it was enough to open the door to something new. They didn't fully understand how it worked, but they knew it was their best shot. The military, desperate for anything that could give them an edge, quickly began working around the clock to reverse engineer it. What they discovered shocked them. The aliens' technology wasn't invincible. In fact, it was designed to be used in a very specific way, one that required a lot more than just raw power. The alien weapons were based on energy systems that humans could adapt. With this discovery, the fight had shifted. The aliens had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to make the impossible possible. As the world burned, a fire ignited inside humanity's heart, a fire that would never be extinguished. Against overwhelming odds, the fight for Earth had only just begun. The initial shock had worn off, but the world was far from recovering. In the aftermath of the alien invasion, cities lay in ruins, with fires still smoldering and debris scattered across once thriving streets. Amidst the destruction, humanity began to reorganize, not with the optimism they once had, but with a grim determination that would define the rest of their fight. The aliens, convinced that the Earth would fall into chaos and surrender, had made the mistake of thinking humans would submit without a struggle. They believed their superior technology and overwhelming numbers would crush any resistance. However, what they hadn't counted on was the indomitable spirit of the human race. In every corner of the world, pockets of resistance began to form. Governments were fractured, yes, but human ingenuity and desperation were never more apparent. Resistance groups, both large and small, began to emerge from the shadows. Some were organized military units, still holding on to old weapons and strategic tactics. Others were groups of ordinary civilians, teachers, farmers, and even children who refused to sit idly by as their world burned. The first truly organized counterattack came a week after the invasion began. A coalition of survivors in what was left of Washington, D.C., managed to pull together a ragtag army. They were poorly equipped, relying on scavenged weapons and improvised tools. But they had something the invaders couldn't understand: an unyielding drive to protect their homes and loved ones. They weren't soldiers, they were just people who knew how to fight. The plan was simple, but audacious. They had discovered one of the alien landing zones, the area where the largest ships had initially set up camp. If they could infiltrate the perimeter and disable the ship's communication systems, it might buy them enough time to organize a proper defense. It was a long shot, but the resistance had no other choice. Every moment spent cowering in fear meant another moment for the invaders to tighten their grip on the planet. The strike force, numbering fewer than 100, moved under the cover of night. The city, still smoldering in places, felt eerily quiet. There were no birds singing, no cars honking. The world was held in the grasp of an alien nightmare, and yet these humans would not go quietly. They snuck through the ruined streets, using the wreckage of the city as cover, moving as quietly as possible. They knew that if the aliens spotted them, it would be a massacre. The alien technology could wipe out entire squads with a single shot. Stealth was their only advantage. It was a human quality that the invaders didn't understand: ability to think outside the box, to adapt in ways that machines could not. The leader of the strike team, Captain Rachel Harper, had been with the U.S. Army for over a decade. But she was no longer fighting for her country. She was fighting for her daughter, her husband, and every person who was still alive in the ruins of her city. This fight had become something far more personal than just a war. It was survival, and it was vengeance. When they finally reached the perimeter, the task was clear: disable the ship's power grid, and if possible, hack into its communication system to send a false signal to the alien fleet, buying time for the resistance to regroup and counterattack. They had no idea how they would pull it off, but desperation was a powerful motivator. The first few moments of the mission went smoothly. They disabled several Sentry's alien drones that floated above the ground like large insectoid creatures without incident. They had learned to adapt the alien weapons, repurposing them for their own use. The high-powered energy rifles, once designed for obliterating armored vehicles, were now effective tools in the hands of human ingenuity. The aliens had expected advanced armies, but they had underestimated the human ability to adapt and repurpose. Then, disaster struck. A human mistake. Someone had tripped an alarm. The distant hum of the ship's engines grew louder, the vibrations underfoot intensifying. Within moments, the alien ships began to power up. The resistance team had only minutes before the ship's defenses would activate. Captain Harper gave the order to rush the communications room, a small fortified bunker within the ship. She could hear the steady thrum of the alien forces mobilizing, preparing to deal with them. This was the final stand. Harper's heart raced as they reached the door to the communications room. The aliens were closing in on them, their energy weapons already charging. The small human group had only one chance to complete their mission. They had no choice but to fight to the last dot, and fight they did. The humans, despite being outgunned and outclassed in terms of technology, refused to give in. Using tactics the aliens couldn't understand, they fought with everything they had. They used every piece of the wreckage around them, every scrap of technology, to their advantage. The aliens had underestimated one thing: humans never fought the same way twice. They would do whatever it took to win, no matter the cost. Captain Harper and her team managed to breach the communications room. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't easy. They fought tooth and nail, using their stolen alien technology to disrupt the ship's power core. As the aliens rushed to retake control of the ship, the humans did the impossible. They hacked into the mainframe, using the aliens' own systems against them. They didn't understand everything they were doing, but they understood enough. A few carefully placed commands sent the ship's communication systems into chaos, confusing the alien fleet and buying precious minutes for Earth's remaining forces. The victory, however small, was enough. It was a sign to the invaders that humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. When the alien forces realized that they were no longer in control of the communication grid, they reacted with fury. The tide had shifted. The aliens, confident in their easy conquest of Earth, now faced the terrifying realization that humanity was far more resilient than they had ever imagined. The invaders were facing something far worse than just an enemy. They were facing a force of nature, and with that small, desperate victory, the resistance knew that Earth wasn't lost. It was just beginning to fight back. The days following the first major victory felt like an eternity. Earth had been knocked to its knees, but the spark of resistance, once kindled, began to catch fire. People no longer sat idly by, waiting for help that never came. They understood, now more than ever, that the only way to win this war was to stand up and fight, no matter how impossible it seemed. Across the world, isolated pockets of human resistance were spreading like wildfire. From the remnants of military bases in the Midwest to the makeshift bunkers in the mountains of Switzerland, humans were adapting, learning, and fighting back. Even in the darkest corners of the planet, in places where the aliens had hit hardest, hope began to rise. And as these cells of resistance began to cooperate, something powerful began to take shape. A plan. The humans had no grand armies, no overwhelming air forces, and no cutting-edge technology. At least, not at first. But what they had was an instinct for survival, the ability to think on their feet, and, most importantly, a ruthless determination to win. They began to focus their efforts, hit the invaders where they were vulnerable, and learn as much as they could about the alien technology they had stolen. Weeks had passed since Captain Harper and her team infiltrated the alien ship and successfully disrupted their communications. The alien fleet, disoriented and unable to coordinate with the precision they had relied on, had started to fragment. The humans, though outclassed in every way, were using their intelligence and adaptability to exploit these cracks in the aliens' armor. One of the most critical discoveries came from an unlikely source, Dr. Elena Kincaid, a brilliant astrophysicist turned resistance scientist. After several months of studying the aliens' power grids and weapons systems, she and her team managed to reverse engineer a small piece of the alien technology, a weapon that could potentially level the playing field. It was nothing like anything humanity had ever used before, a hybrid between human ingenuity and alien science, a high-powered energy cannon that could punch through the aliens' nearly indestructible shields. It wasn't perfect. It was still experimental, and they had limited resources to build more. But it was a start. Dr. Kincaid's weapon became the turning point. With it, humans could breach the alien ships, forcing the invaders to reconsider their approach. And so, as the resistance began to coalesce, the first real offensive against the alien forces was born. It began in South America, in a small town on the outskirts of Buenos Aires. A resistance group, armed with the newly developed energy cannons, launched a surprise assault on one of the smaller, less guarded alien supply ships. The goal was simple: sabotage. The ship was packed with supplies, fuel, munitions, and the necessary components to support the larger invasion forces, but most importantly, it was an opportunity to send a message. The raid, planned and executed with extreme precision, was an astounding success. The human forces managed to breach the outer defenses of the supply ship and destroy its core, sending a massive explosion into the sky. The blast could be seen from miles away, and the message was loud and clear: Earth was not defeated. The war was not over. The success of this raid had a ripple effect. Other resistance groups, seeing what humans could do when united, began to rally around this new offensive. Communication between the various factions became more coordinated. They traded intel, shared resources, and offered mutual support. The growing unity between human cells of resistance was more than the aliens could handle. The next target was bigger. A massive warship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a ship so large that it had been thought impenetrable, a floating fortress in the sky. The mission: destroy it before it could deploy its weapons against the remaining human strongholds. Captain Harper, now promoted and leading a multi-nation strike force, had no illusions about the difficulty of this mission. They were taking on the heart of the alien military presence in the Pacific, and every moment spent planning was a risk. There were no guarantees, but they had no choice. The resistance was building momentum, and if they didn't take the fight to the aliens now, they might never get another chance. The plan was brutal in its simplicity: a multi-pronged assault, with strike teams attacking from every direction, coordinated by hacked alien communications. Their new energy cannons, while not perfected, had become effective enough to break through the ship's shields. But the real weapon was the human determination to finish what they had started. The team infiltrated the warship's outer perimeter, using stolen alien cloaking technology to remain unseen by the ship's scanners. As they neared their target, a sense of anticipation began to build. It was a delicate operation. One misstep, one mistake, and they would be vaporized before they had a chance to strike. At the heart of the alien warship, they found what they were looking for: a massive energy core, the source of the ship's power. They needed to destroy it. But to do that, they had to reach it without triggering the ship's self-defense mechanisms. Captain Harper led the charge, with a small team of soldiers. They moved quickly and silently, using every piece of alien technology they could scavenge. The enemies, despite their overwhelming force, were still vulnerable to the unexpected tactics of the humans. Just when it seemed the ship's defense systems had detected them, a well-timed strike from an energy cannon tore a hole in the ship's outer wall, allowing them entry into the heart of the beast. For hours, they fought through tight corridors and alien defenses, their movements fast and determined, each step bringing them closer to their goal. The warship's massive engines rumbled around them, but they weren't going to let the threat of death stop them. They reached the core. Captain Harper, heart racing, stepped forward and placed the explosive charges. Her fingers shook, but there was no hesitation. They had no time to waste. A countdown began, and the soldiers moved quickly, retreating to the designated extraction point. The countdown reached its final moments. They barely made it. The explosion was deafening. The energy core detonated with such force that it sent shockwaves through the ship, tearing through its structure and igniting massive fires throughout the vessel. The once unstoppable warship was now a blazing wreck. The human strike force had succeeded, but not without great cost. Several of their own had fallen in the battle. As the ship burned in the distance, the humans stood on the shore, breathless. The first significant alien vessel to be destroyed at the hands of human forces. It was a victory, but it was just the beginning. The turning point had arrived. The destruction of the alien warship was not just a victory, it was a signal to the invaders that Earth was not a prize to be easily claimed. Humanity, despite all odds, had managed to break through the aliens' seemingly impenetrable defenses. It was proof that Earth's resistance wasn't a fleeting spark. It was a fire that was spreading faster than the invaders could contain. The alien fleet, still vast and powerful, was thrown into disarray. The humans' success at dismantling their advanced warships shook the invaders' confidence. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens began to question whether their conquest of Earth would be as swift and easy as they had anticipated. But while the invaders reeled from their losses, humanity was not content to rest on their laurels. The victory in the Pacific had proven that they could defeat the seemingly unbeatable. Now, the stakes were higher, and the resistance knew that the next step would determine the fate of Earth. After the destruction of the warship, the resistance groups around the world quickly regrouped. The momentum was palpable. The alien command had been rattled, and Earth's survivors saw their opportunity to take the fight to them directly. The next phase of the war would require coordination like never before, an haute assault on the heart of the alien invasion force. The first target was the alien command ship, the largest, most formidable vessel in their fleet. It was believed to be the source of all their strategic planning, the ship that coordinated every aspect of the invasion from orbit. Without it, the invaders' ability to control the rest of their fleet would crumble. The mission was simple in theory: infiltrate the command ship, destroy its core, and scatter the remaining alien forces. But nothing about this mission would be simple. The plan was nothing short of audacious. Captain Rachel Harper, now at the forefront of Earth's resistance leadership, stood in front of a map spread across a table in a hidden underground base in what remained of New York City. Around her were the brightest military strategists, scientists, and engineers Earth had to offer. Each one of them had a single focus: to end this war. We know the stakes. Harper began, her voice steady, despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. We take out their command ship. We disrupt their operations. We'll have a fighting chance to win this war. But we need to hit them hard, hit them fast, and hit them with everything we've got. The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. The plan was risky, but it was the only option. Humanity had already made it clear to the aliens that they would not go quietly. The question now was whether they could keep up the momentum. They had the weapons, thanks to the work of Dr. Alina Kincaid and her team, who had managed to develop a prototype weapon that could destabilize the alien ship's core. But they also had to face one undeniable fact. The alien command ship was surrounded by a massive fleet, each vessel more advanced and deadly than anything Earth had ever seen. It was a suicide mission. But humanity had already learned that the price of survival was often steep. Harper stood before the resistance leaders, determination hardening in her eyes. We will hit their command ship at its weakest point. The propulsion core. It's the one thing they can't protect with their shields. Our best chance is to strike quickly, destroy their systems before they can react. We take down the core, and their fleet loses its coordination. Everyone knew it wasn't going to be easy, but the chance to strike at the heart of the alien fleet was too important to pass up. The plan began to take shape quickly. The assault would be led by a small, elite team of soldiers, engineers, and scientists, many of whom had already participated in earlier raids. The team would board the alien command ship, bypass the defenses, plant explosives at the propulsion core, and then get out. If they were successful, the entire alien fleet would lose its ability to communicate and coordinate. Without the command ship, they would be disorganized, vulnerable. The ground forces on Earth would have a fighting chance. The invasion's commander, a creature known only as Iron, had spent weeks overseeing Earth's conquest with chilling precision. He had been confident that humanity's defeat was inevitable. But as his fleets began to lose their grip on the planet, he found himself struggling with a growing realization. The humans were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their planet, and they were willing to give everything to keep it. The alien forces began to prepare for a counterattack. Unsure of how much longer their hold on Earth would last, they had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now they were paying the price. As Captain Harper's team prepared for the mission, there was a palpable sense of urgency in the air. They knew the stakes. This was not just another raid or skirmish. It was the beginning of the end for the aliens or for humanity. Depending on how the next few days played out, the team set out under the cover of darkness, using stealth technology to avoid detection. The alien ships, though powerful, had weaknesses. There were gaps in their sensor network, blind spots in their defense systems. It was these gaps that the humans intended to exploit. The journey to the alien command ship was long and fraught with danger. They encountered several enemy patrols, each one more advanced than the last. Yet, through sheer determination and ingenuity, they pressed on, moving through the alien craft with a mixture of speed and precision. The plan was going smoothly, too smoothly, perhaps. Every moment that passed brought them closer to their target, but also to discovery. As they reached the propulsion core, the gravity of the mission hit them. They were deep within the heart of the alien command ship. The countdown to the detonation was already underway. But just as they set the explosives, the worst possible thing happened. The ship's automated defense systems activated. The corridors shook with the sound of heavy weaponry powering up. They had been detected. "What the hell just happened?" Harper asked, her voice barely a whisper as her team scrambled to prepare for a firefight. "We've been compromised," one of her officers said. "We've got no choice now. We have to fight our way out." The plan had gone wrong, but it wasn't over yet. The countdown continued. They had a small window to escape, but the enemy was closing in fast. With weapons blazing and the heart of the alien ship now destabilizing, Harper and her team fought their way out, pushing through wave after wave of alien soldiers. The resistance was outmatched in every way, but they fought with everything they had, driven by the knowledge that this mission could mean the difference between victory and extinction. As they neared the extraction point, the ship began to tremble. The propulsion core had been hit. The ship was falling apart. They barely made it out in time. Just as they jumped into their escape pods, the entire alien command ship erupted in a brilliant explosion that lit up the night sky. The explosion from the destruction of the alien command ship rippled through the sky, like the first shockwave of a massive storm. It wasn't just an explosion, It was a symbol. The heart of the alien invasion force had been obliterated, and, with it, the carefully constructed order they had maintained for so long. For the first time since the invaders arrived, humanity saw a chance at victory. A flicker of hope in the midst of their struggle. But this was not the end of the warfare. From it, the human resistance had delivered a blow to the invaders that would not easily be forgotten. But the invaders were far from finished. The fleet was still vast, their forces still powerful. The aliens would not simply fold in the face of one defeat. Yet the destruction of their command ship had created a fracture in their leadership, a crack that could be exploited. Captain Rachel Harper and her team had made it out of the explosion, alive, barely. They watched from their escape pods as the alien warship disintegrated before their eyes. It felt surreal. After months of struggling, of hiding and fighting back, this victory was hard to comprehend. The odds had been so stacked against them. But it was real. Back on Earth, the news spread quickly. The destruction of the command ship sent ripples of joy and disbelief across the world. For the first time, humanity had struck at the heart of the invaders, and the entire world saw that their resistance could succeed. People who had been hiding in bunkers, terrified and hopeless, began to emerge. Soldiers who had seen defeat and despair began to rally once more. The human spirit, once battered and broken, had reignited with the power of this victory. But Harper knew that this was no time for celebration. The war was far from over. The aliens were regrouping, reorganizing their forces, and they would return with a vengeance. It was only a matter of time before they launched another offensive. Harper and her team were quickly brought back to Earth. The resistance had a brief moment of respite, but they knew it wouldn't last. Earth's leaders began to discuss the next steps in the war. Now that the aliens had lost their centralized command, their tactics would be erratic, unpredictable. The resistance would need to capitalize on their disarray. The first priority was to secure Earth's major cities. While the aliens could still wreak havoc with their superior technology, they lacked the coordination they once had. The loss of the command ship meant that their vast fleet was now scattered and fragmented. It was an opportunity to strike back, to retake territory, and to force the invaders to retreat. The human forces mobilized quickly. The military worked hand in hand with resistance groups, combining their resources and knowledge. They launched a series of targeted attacks on the remaining alien supply lines, disrupting their ability to communicate and reinforce their positions. Each victory, however small, sent a message. Earth was not done, and then, the counterattack came. A massive alien armada, regrouped and reinforced, emerged from the darkness of space, intent on reasserting control. They had lost ground, but they were far from defeated. The alien fleets were stronger than ever, and their forces were once again coordinated. They had learned from their mistakes, and this time, they would not make the same errors. The next battle would be unlike any the humans had faced before. The resistance knew that they had only one chance to stop the alien armada from crushing everything they had fought for. They had to stop them here, or all the ground they had gained would be lost. Harper was once again at the helm of the operation. This time, it wasn't just about raiding alien ships and disrupting their power. It was about stopping the invaders at their most dangerous point, their full, united force. The resistance had gained strength in numbers, but they knew that they would still be outmatched. The plan was a desperate one. Human forces would launch a multi-pronged assault, striking at several key alien ships in an attempt to divide their fleet and create chaos. At the same time, a smaller, elite strike team would attempt to infiltrate the central command ship, the very ship that had once been destroyed, but now rebuilt and more heavily fortified. They had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. This would be the final battle, a battle that would determine the fate of Earth. As the battle loomed on the horizon, Harper stood before her team, ready to give the order. The faces around her were weary, each of them having been through hell and back. But there was also something else in there, Isa. Quiet, unspoken understanding. They knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting for everything they had left, for everything they had lost. Whatever happens today, Harper began, her voice steady. This is it. We're giving everything we've got. For our families, for our homes, for our future. We take the fight to them. We show them that they'll never break us. Today, we finish what we started. The team responded with a unified nod. They were ready. The resistance wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. The battle for Earth raged across the skies, and on the ground, alien ships, once thought invincible, were torn apart by human ingenuity. The energy weapons that had been reverse-engineered were proving to be far more effective than anyone had anticipated. Human forces, despite being outclassed, fought with an unmatched ferocity, using every bit of stolen alien technology they could find. Then came the decisive strike. A small group of resistance fighters, led by Harper herself, managed to infiltrate the alien command ship once again. This time, it was not just about sabotage, it was about finishing what they had started. They planted explosive charges in the heart of the command ship, disabling its core systems once and for all. As they made their escape, the alien ship exploded in a burst of energy, so intense that it lit up the sky. But this time, there would be no recovery. The aliens' once immense fleet began to fragment, losing the coordination that had made them so powerful. One by one, their ships fell, until the sky above Earth was clear once more. It was over. The battle had been won. The war, however, was far from easy. Earth had taken the first step toward rebuilding, but there would be scars left on the planet for generations. Humanity had proven to the universe that they were not a species to be underestimated, that they would fight for their survival and never surrender. The alien invaders had been defeated, but the world would never be the same. And as Harper looked out across the horizon, watching the first sunrise in years, she knew that humanity had won not just the war, but the future.